This presentation is about recovering token and NFTs for terminated sidechains. So we have seen everything about tokens and how you can send them around, but you have also seen that there are protection mechanisms in place in the Lisk ecosystem that can terminate a sidechain under certain conditions. And so this is what we will talk about in this talk. First, we will see the sidechain termination procedures and which conditions can lead to a termination. And then we will go over all three recovery mechanisms and recovery transactions, which are message recovery transaction, token recovery transaction, and NFT recovery transactions. And lastly, we will see a small practical usage of those transactions in the ecosystem. All right, so let's start with a sidechain termination. The main reason for termination is probably inactivity. Sidechains are required to post one cross-chain update to the main chain every month to show that they are live and to maintain the connection to the main chain. If they fail to do so, the main chain will consider the sidechain as not live anymore, and the connection will be terminated. Another reason why termination could occur is the sidechain is not following the interoperability protocol. This shouldn't happen. It would only happen if somebody goes into the interoperability module and modifies it on purpose to have wrong information, and then maybe the message doesn't follow the correct message format, or the CCU doesn't have the correct format, and this could lead to a chain termination. All right, but we think that this should not happen very often, because if you use the provided interoperability module, all the checks will be done so that you never send bad data. However, if one connection is terminated and you cannot exchange messages from the sidechain to the main chain anymore, well, the tokens that you had on the sidechain are blocked there. You cannot send them back to the main chain. And so to avoid that users have lost their tokens forever, we are introducing those recovery transactions, which are a fully on-chain process. So it's done on the main chain. You don't need access to the sidechain anymore. It's fully trustless, like everything is proved via Merkle proofs, and it's secure in the sense that nobody can steal tokens in a closed sidechains. Let's start by looking at the message recovery transaction and why it's needed. All right. I have here on the right a picture of the sidechain account on the main chain. All the messages sent from the main chain to the sidechain go into the outbox of this account. From this outbox, they are then collected by Relayer and included in the sidechain. And then the sidechain is reporting back to the main chain that the messages have been applied in the sidechain, and this is acknowledged on the main chain. However, you can see that this has a certain latency. It's like sending a letter to a friend. You put the letter in the mailbox, but it doesn't magically appear at your friend's house. And so it could be that you have certain letters which are still stuck in the mailbox, even when the sidechain is terminated. And this is given by this property, the partner chain inbox size, which acknowledges which messages were included in the sidechain and reported as included. And so all messages which have been sent afterwards are considered pending, and those ones can be recovered. Okay, so what does it mean to recover a message, and what you need to do to recover a message? Well, it's very easy. It's a main chain transaction where you will specify the chain ID of the chain that is terminated. You will specify all the messages that you want to recover, and array of sibling hashes, which is a proof that those messages are actually pending. So here is your favorite picture of a Merkle tree, where you have some messages in the outbox which are still pending. And so in the transaction, you will say, OK, I want to recover maybe message 32 and 34. And so to prove that they are part of the inbox, you will need to provide the information which is here in the red boxes. And so everybody can can verify that those messages were actually part of the outbox and you're not trying to recover something fake. But we don't want the message to be recovered more than once. So once you send a recovery transaction, we modify the outbox by tagging those messages as recovered. This modifies the outbox route and prevents that the messages are recovered a second time. So in terms of outcome, once you send this recovery transaction, the outbox is updated and all the messages are returned. This means that for messages coming from the main chain, which were LSK transferred to the sidechains, you just get your Lisk back directly to your account. And if the message was sent from one sidechain to another sidechain, basically we revert the message, tag it as being recovered, and include it back in the sending sidechain. Something that you could have noticed is that this recovery outcome is independent of the sender of the transaction. So when I send the recovery transaction, the messages are sent back to their sender and to their sidechain, their originating sidechain, but I don't get anything out of it. I cannot steal any messages for myself. And that's quite important because it allows this recovery mechanism to be integrated in a service where one service provider could recover many messages at once and everybody would get their message back. But maybe your message has already been applied, and so on the sidechain you have some tokens and those tokens are blocked. In that regard, you can do something very similar. You can prove that you have a certain account on the sidechain. And for this, here you have the diagram of the sidechain account. You will need to provide your address, the token ID that you want to recover, and how much tokens are in your account. This also works for LSK tokens because they are part of the token module, and so they have the same structure as any other token. You can also recover NFTs in exactly the same way, and for this you will provide the NFT ID and the owner, the log status, and the attributes of the NFT, and the attributes will also be recovered to the native chain. Well, in terms of transaction, it's exactly what you would expect. You provide the ID of the terminated chain, you provide all the accounts that you want to recover, and you provide a Merkle proof that those accounts are part of the state of the sidechain. So here is a quick example. Let's say you want to recover some gold tokens, some LSK, and some stablecoin, which are represented here by the accounts surrounded in red. You will provide the information in the other red boxes, and this generates a Merkle proof that those accounts are in the state root. Once the transaction is processed, we will empty the accounts and update the state root to acknowledge that those accounts are now empty, and so the tokens cannot be recovered twice in a row. And to have a similar slide to message recovery, here we see what is happening when you do a token recovery. The sidechain root is updated. You get your token back on the native chain. So if it's a Lisk token, you get it straight back on the Lisk's main chain. But if it's a sidechain token, we will create a cross-chain message, and we send this message back to the native chain of the token so that you can receive your tokens on the native chain. And again, this is totally independent of the sender of the transaction. So anybody or any service provider can do this recovery, and nobody can steal the tokens from you on the terminated chain. They will always be returned back to the owner of the account. Let's now just see what information you need for this recovery mechanism to be possible. So for the message recovery, the only thing you need is actually all the messages, because if you have all the messages, you can reconstruct the Merkle tree, and this allows you to reconstruct the Merkle proofs that are needed. So basically, you only need to listen to main chain blocks. For token and NFT recovery, you need some sidechain information, and you need to have the whole tree of accounts because you need to create the proof of your account in the state root. And so here, you need information about the sidechain and about the main chain because you want to know which was the last state root certified on the main chain, because you need your proof into this state root. All right, and so to summarize, we introduced those message recovery transactions and those token recovery transactions. The messages are recovered from the sidechain outbox, and the tokens are recovered from the last certified state root in the sidechain account from the main chain. This is purely a main chain process. It's totally trustless, totally secure. And in this regard, even if a sidechain is terminated, nobody will lose their tokens. So that's it from me.